tutoring can be integrated in our education system in a whole new way through the National Tutoring Programme, I think that would be a wonderful, positive step forward for education.
I try all the time when I'm tutoring to bring my science into the real world.
I try not to make my lessons solely another classroom lesson. And I've talked to you, Ludo, about this before, asking how they are and really meaning it. Because without that and without them being ready to learn, not a lot is going to go in, and you're not going to have knowledge to build off of if they're not ready to learn in the first place.
The pandemic has stimulated the government to try and do something dramatic, and they've picked on tutoring to do that. And I think that's wonderful. I think absolutely the right thing.
Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes.
Hello and welcome to our final Late Night Live podcast of the Love Tutoring Festival 2021. I can't really believe that we have got to Thursday evening already. What a journey we've been on as a team and as a cohort of attendees over the past 4 days. We have learned a great deal from the SEND and mental health specialists on the Monday, from the small business experts on the Tuesday, from the teaching and learning powerhouses and masterminds of education on the Wednesday, to the NTP leaders and those that have made it happen today on Thursday, the 1st of July. We have learned a huge amount. I am your host tonight, Ludo Miller, and this evening I will be joined by Linda Larby, Hazel Barnett, and Jolyon White. Now, as a brief introduction to the three of our guests this evening, Linda is a university researcher at the Institute of Education at UCL, has recently completed an MSc in Child Development, and is a tutor with Manning's Tutors, coordinating their efforts with partner schools as part of the NTP. Linda is also excitingly leading our very first gratitude circle tomorrow morning on Friday, the 2nd of July, from 9 till 10 a.m. BST. So watch out for that. Hazel has been in the tutoring game for longer than most tutors that we've come across. Hazel is an active and engaged community member and draws on her MEd in maths education and dyslexia to find solutions to every issue, concern and query for both students and fellow tutors. So thank you for joining us here, Hazel. Our final guest this evening is Jolyon White. Jolyon is a tutor, a teacher, an entrepreneur, a former honorary research associate at UCL, and a science whiz who ably connects the real world with learning for his students. I myself am lucky enough to have worked alongside Jolyon in the last few months, and we are all lucky that he is here tonight to contribute his experiences and knowledge of the NTP, both from a tutor's perspective and as someone with their head above the parapet, shall we say. So all are excellent tutors, NTP or otherwise, in their own right, and that's why they are here this evening. So welcome the three of you to this evening. I'm going to kick off this evening with one of our favourite questions, and Hazel, I'm going to start with you here. That question is, drum roll, what is your why as a tutor, Hazel?
Number one is to try to dismantle the barriers to learning. That goes back to my work as a SENCO, Special Educational Needs Coordinator, and helping to make learning accessible to the students, to make a difference after lockdown, to complement what schools are doing, and to build confidence by teaching in the way children learn and to encourage them to be reflective learners.
Very good.
That's my why.
Yeah, there's 3 whys. Jolyon.
Well, in the words of Douglas Adams, I'm a great fan of science. And as such, I'm a missionary. I want to convey that love of science to young people so that they can see how it affects them, how it fits into their lives. I mean, my introduction covered that perfectly. I try all the time when I'm tutoring to bring my science into the real world. And that way, I hope that students will realize it's not frightening, it's not mysterious. Well, it is mysterious, but it is accessible. They can get to it. They can do it just like any other subject. So that would be my why. And I guess, like a lot of teachers, I'm fairly extrovert, and it satisfies that extroversion in me to have that communication and that contact time with students. It's a lot of fun.
And being on podcasts, yes?
I'm being on podcasts, yeah. Yeah, that works perfectly. Even better. You just have to go and press the mute button every now and again, Ludo, to shut me up, okay?
Linda, can I turn to you? Can you try and follow that answer from Jolyon?
I'll try. My why is certainly just helping the next generation. I mean, this generation of children growing up now, as with every generation, they're facing different issues and some of the same issues that children have faced as they're growing up. And I was lucky enough, and I'll talk more about this in the gratitude circle tomorrow, but I was lucky enough to have amazing tutors and teachers in my life. And I think they really instilled in me the sort of qualities that a good tutor would have. So I'm sort of passing that on to today's generation. And I've really enjoyed being involved with education. So I used to be a teaching assistant for around 4 years. And that inspired me to do my master's in child development. And then I think naturally I came into tutoring just wanting to get even more involved with this generation and supporting them in the way they need.
Very good, wonderful. Well, there's a great spread of whys there, and it's always I feel a great start to a conversation to kind of to lay down the perspectives of our speakers ahead of us. So thank you for those answers for the 3 of you. Now, this conversation, the title of this podcast is being an NTP tutor, and today we've heard a great deal of conversation about the NTP, about what's gone right and what's perhaps not gone quite so well, and the impact it may have, the findings from the first year, and a little bit about the legacy that the NTP could have going into future years. But what I want to start with the 3 of you tonight, being tutors on the front line, as it were, of the NTP, is what's, in your view, what has gone well with regard to the NTP? What has the NTP done well? Jolyon, can I start with you?
Yes. It's done a lot of things well. It's brought tutoring to the forefront. It's given it a place in the public's eye that it never had before. It has gone to some extent to breaking down the concept that it's a middle class stroke high net worth activity. It's gone to some extent to break that down. And I don't want to move on to the negatives because your question is what it's done well. And I think the other thing that we haven't really appreciated yet is the fact that it has addressed the structural problems of when you start to try and tutor tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of children, students that have never been tutored before. It's revealed those structural problems, and the agencies, and in all their different ways, have attempted to address this. So there is, if we can ever bring that together, there is a wealth of understanding between those agencies of how to get tutors in front of students, how to work with schools and tutors together. So in those things, it's opened that whole can of worms. I don't think it's solved it yet. I think there's a long way to go before it's solved it. And I think there'll be structural changes within schools if tutoring is to continue. There'll have to be for it to integrate properly. But just at the moment, it's opening that up as a possibility.
Hey, Hazel, are you inclined to agree with what Jolyon has put forth there?
Absolutely, yes. The things that I wrote down are it's raising the profile of tutoring as a profession. But I think linking tutors with schools in a more intentional way is wonderful. I agree it's got a long way to go because the amount of administration and connectedness that is needed, it's huge, and we're just at the beginning of the process. But if tutoring could be integrated in our education system in a whole new way through the National Tutoring Programme, I think that would be a wonderful, positive step forward for education.
Yeah, I think it's that language of next steps forward is I think pretty central here, because I don't think anyone predicted that the first year of the NTP was going to be a kind of rip-roaring success, and kind of in the language of the NTP itself, I don't think anyone believed that it was going to catch up all the students in year one. I think, just as Jolyon has, and you've been saying, Hazel, it's about starting that process of deploying tutors, or starting that process of making use of tutors, because we know that tutoring is effective. And that's really the bottom line. Tutoring is an effective way to educate children. So, Linda, I hope I haven't put words into your mouth. What were your thoughts on this? What were your thoughts on what the NTP has done well this year?
I would definitely echo Jolyon and Hazel in that there are teething issues with it. But in the most positive ways, I think the NTP has helped these children where there's been massive disruption to their education. And even with these teething issues, there's been a lot of connectivity. So I've had students that have never talked to each other in school before, actually, starting to interact, not just in my lesson, but outside of my lesson. And I think that has been, not exactly a goal of the NTP scheme, but it's definitely been a positive. And I just think the support that is being offered by these tutors is better than having nothing at all. So I think there has been an effort to catch up and to help these students to, reach certain goals and to bridge this gap that the pandemic has caused. So I do feel that it's definitely been a step in the right direction. There's a lot of different things that is yet to come, and we need to work on these things. But in terms of just being the support and being there, I think is probably the most positive thing to come out of the scheme.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to you actually for this point, Linda, as well. Did you feel that when you began as an NTP tutor that you felt your role was going to be more academic focused or more kind of pastoral support focused? Was there any inclination that you were going to be doing more than one of the other?
No, so I think going in, like many tutors, I had in my head this was purely academic. There's a gap, and there's been a whole pandemic. These children are behind. Some children didn't engage much with their online teaching in schools already. So I understood it as, helping to bridge this gap that has been created by the pandemic. But the more I got into it and the conversations that I had with my tutees sort of in my lessons, even though it's solely a lesson on, say, science or English, there has been a lot of pastoral things crop up. So, I try not to make my lessons solely another classroom lesson, And I've talked to you, Ludo, about this before, asking how they are and really meaning it, because without that and without them being ready to learn, not a lot is going to go in, and you're not going to have, a lot of, knowledge to build off of if they're not ready to learn in the first place. So the first 10 minutes ish, whilst everyone's filtering into the lesson, is very much, how are you? The icebreakers that I normally have in my lessons, and just gently getting into the flow of learning. So I think now, it is a mixture of both for me.
Yeah. Jolene, would you say that your expectations of what your role was going to be at the start, do you think those were borne out?
Yes, there were. I've taught in classroom, I've taught science in secondary schools, and I think the problems go back way before the pandemic. The pandemic has simply highlighted difficulties and issues. I think we're running schools with classes that are very large, and we're running classes of 35, even in some cases 40 children in a class with a single teacher. And with the best will in the world, you're going to be doing a lot of crowd control in that. Now, there are outstanding teachers, and they do survive, and they do teach, and some students come out of that well. But, if a student misses something in a class that size, the chances of catching up without some small group teaching in there to support is very unlikely they're going to catch up. I had 3 students this morning that I was tutoring, and they're initially I said, do you like science? Just an opener. I've never taught them before. No, we don't like science. Okay, why don't you like science? What is it about it that you don't like? The teacher goes too fast. Well, the teacher's got no choice. They've got a curriculum to do. They've got a timetable to hit. They've got to hit particular deadlines because that's what the national curriculum says they must hit. These students are expected to get something between 4 and 6 at GCSE, and yet, talking to them for 10 minutes or so, damn well they're capable of getting of 6, 7, even with a little bit of proper teaching. They are. They're not stupid. There's nothing about them that's stupid. But I think those problems were there intrinsically in the system before. The pandemic has stimulated the government to try and do something dramatic, and they've picked on tutoring to do that. And I think that's wonderful. I think absolutely the right thing. I don't even call it tutoring. I call it small group teaching, because that's what it is. I'm not teaching single students one-to-one. I'm teaching groups of 3 normally. And that's perfect. I like that. But I think that's where we're coming from. What we're doing, I think, is making a step actually in the right direction for education. Yes, we need them in big groups for some things, and we need good teachers who can do that. But we also need to get them down into small groups and deal with their individual personal needs, rather than thinking of them as just meat going through a sausage machine. That's where I'm coming from, and that's why I don't teach big groups anymore in a classroom. I teach small groups because I can do a hell of a lot more. I can teach a group of 3. I can't teach a group of 40. I'm not good enough.
Well, you have a different skill set. Exactly. Yeah.
A different mentality.
Yeah. Hazel, what kind of group sizes were you tutoring? Were you tending to be one-on-one, or were you tending to be small group?
In the past, going back years and years from when I started in 1991 and then went into different directions and then back again into tutoring, it was always one-to-one. So this small group tutoring is a whole new dynamic for me. And to be quite honest, the first time when I had 3 students I'd never met before, I was absolutely terrified. And, because I didn't feel confident with the technology, and they didn't have their cameras on. And so I had to rely on voices, and they were from a school in Sheffield. One of them had moved from London. She was easily discernible. But the other 2, I just had 2 Sheffield accents from girls, and I didn't know which one was which. It was I found it really hard. And there were technical problems to do with the company. They got the wrong link. they'd been sent the wrong link. So they were coming in under the name as a company owner. And nobody could solve this link problem. So, there were all sorts of technical things going on, and me trying to manage Bramble and all of this. So, the first few sessions, I was just really anxious beforehand, I must say. But I've got some groups of 3, some year 8s in one of the schools that I'm working with at the moment. And they're just absolutely lovely. They work well together. And but in the past, I've done class teaching in an independent school, so I've been used to that as well. The bigger group, and then the middle-sized group for literacy support. So I suppose I've done all different sizes, but I'm getting used to the triple. Yeah, I think with the one-to-one, I do like the one-to-one because I've kind of feel I've got a helper gift more than a leadership gift. So I like to just get to know them one-on-one. But if the person is very shy and awkward, and I feel awkward, then that can be really tense. So, yeah, sometimes having the larger number sort of diffuses it a bit, unless they're a bit tricky, like one of them says this one, the other one's just smashed me in the face. And, like, you've got no camera, so you can't see if anyone has smashed anyone in the face because they're being, just being a bit cheeky. They're in the school setting in that case. So I say, have you got a teacher there watching you? So anyway, yeah, it's been a huge, steep learning curve, but I'm glad I've persevered with it, actually. So it's a whole new type of career to me, teaching online.
Yeah, I mean, I would challenge anyone, exactly as Hazel says, to have learned as much and as quickly about online tutoring as Hazel has, especially given that Hazel's been in the education sphere for so long.
3 different platforms I've had to teach on.
Yeah, no, I mean, learning one is not enough. So kind of on that theme, Linda, I'm going to turn to you here. What the theme of what you have learned off the back of the NTP, whether that was because of the NTP or because online tutoring was forced upon us, anyway. What skills have you learned as a tutor through your work during the NTP, Linda?
I would definitely say, I don't know if this would quite be a skill, but finding out what these children actually need help with. So sort of investigative skills, I guess, because even if a school has provided certain guidance, the children are very honest with what they are struggling with and what they'd like to do in the next lesson. So, I've sort of had to break down certain lessons and rearrange certain things and get reorganized in order to teach these children the specific things that they'd like to actually get help with. Because a lot of the time, I guess, schools give out this guidance and sometimes they don't give any out at all. But the children are very honest with, things that they'd like to work on. So it's a lot of chopping and changing sometimes. It's a lot of finding extra things or thinking on the spot, different ways that you can explain something, different, forms of media that you could use, and, just working on the spot and being able to chop and change as is required, really.
Yeah, exactly. So on that same theme, Jolyon, working on the spot, having to be responsive in the moment in these sessions, because they're probably unlike any other sessions that tutors have had before. And you've just mentioned there one tip that you had about students with their cameras off. How have you found that kind of completely different atmosphere and vibe to these sessions than there has been probably before in your tutoring or teaching career?
The first session I had with no camera, it's working with Bramble. Bramble does have a video facility, but it only works on certain devices, and the students on the whole have equipment which is too cheap for it to work. So they don't have video. So normally with Bramble, you're working without. First time I had it, bit disconcerting. And it's disconcerting partly because, as you say, you don't have to be afraid to ask who's speaking. But, you don't even know from their names nowadays, or I don't because I'm not that multicultural enough. I don't know from their names whether they're girls or boys.
I've had that.
When they're year 9, or even year 10 sometimes, it's quite tricky to tell. When they get to year 11, it's easier. But year 9 and 10, it's a bit tricky. So again, you've got to get over this. You just have to get over it and say, yeah, okay, who answered that question? Who's speaking? And eventually you will start to recognize their voices. And, if you say, right, okay, you were out playing football today, okay? And one of them says, well, I'm a girl, I don't play football. Well, my answer to that is, well, why not? I mean, everybody should be playing football nowadays, in my opinion. So yes, it is a bit odd, and you don't get the emotional you don't get the visual emotional feedback. And that again, there is a whole bit of signaling. But, if you were a blind teacher, and there's plenty of those around, you'd have to cope without visual signals. So you just learn to do it. And you do have to ask a lot of questions. There was a thump this morning during my tutorial session that I was doing. And I said, well, what's happened? Oh, somebody's come over and kicked him. Well, okay. All right, fair enough. Has the teaching assistant just left the room by any chance? Yes. Oh, right. Okay. Is he all right? Yeah, he's okay. Is he going to come back online? Yes, he is. He's gone over to kick him and take his microphone. Okay, fair enough. Now come back. Okay, he's back now. He's plugged in. He can hear you. He can speak to you now. Previously, his microphone was messing around, so he was sharing a mic with the guy next to him. God knows about social distancing. I have no idea what was going on with that. But you know what I mean? This is the kind of thing you just have to relax and get into it and get into the swing. And then you start bringing your stuff in, your wow factor stuff in your science, and try and get them to interact. You do, I think, without visual, have to get a lot more back from them. Mm. They've got to participate, because otherwise you've no idea what they're doing. And if you're not getting regular feedback, you don't get it. So you can't go into lecture mode. And that is something I have really learned to do in a tutorial situation where there's no camera. Other than that, you just get on with it and do it. Yeah.
I guess it's difficult to be responsive to a student, isn't it, when you can't see them, because we get so much from the visual cues of a learner. So absolutely, Hazel.
And you don't know. Well, I've learned that you can do clever things with Google, but you don't. If you're setting them a task and they're doing a bit of independent work, you don't know if it's their work or which one of them. I write down scores and that, but you don't know which one has actually produced the work, or whether you can't see anything whether they look at each other's. Not that really matters, but in these early days with this school from Sheffield, you just have to think on the spot, what am I going to do? So until I'd got the voice, I didn't completely master the two of the voices, but on Bramble, I just assigned a different pen colour to them all. So we just started to do some tasks, and then I said, so-and-so, now it's your turn. Can you write something on this graph or on this shape? Now it's your turn with this colour. So I had to kind of do it that way to distinguish by the colours of pen that they were working on the Bramble notebook. But you just have to think on your feet and try and come up with good ideas on the spur of the moment. But yes, it's all good fun.
Linda, any good ideas that have come to you on the spur of the moment that you that come to you?
In terms of technology, or
in terms of just ways that you've reacted in the moment in the NTP session.
I guess in terms of Bramble, it's sort of like a big whiteboard. So a lot of the time, if there is a misunderstanding on a topic, especially in biology, I end up drawing it out and relating it to something that the kids sort of are familiar with. So I guess there was a time, I think it was a biology lesson, we're talking about covalent bonds, and I was trying to get across that it's a bond formed with where there's a sharing of electrons, and there was just nothing going into this child. So I used the example, and I literally drew out some sick children, and I was saying, if this is your friend, you share your sweets with them, and then it might strengthen your friendship, might strengthen your bond. And that was very in the moment, very very out there. So I was even thinking in my head, is he even going to relate this to chemistry? But he did get it in the end. So
I hope we'll never see this whiteboard as well.
I hope no one never will, because I was really bad at drawing those sweets and children.
To join the growing number of qualified tutors, enrol now for the Level 3 qualification for tutors. This 8-week online facilitated course covers the roles and responsibilities involved in teaching and learning, with a particular focus on inclusion, assessment, and feedback. Upon completion, you'll be awarded a Level 3 in education and training from Ofqual recognised training provider Highfield Qualifications. You will also gain a Qualified Tutor Quality Mark, the independent quality mark for tutors. Whatever your starting point, a qualification for tutors has to be the next step. Enroll today at qualifiedtutor.org/training.
Jolyon, I'm sure you found yourself relating covalent bonds to funny kind of real world problems in the past.
Yeah, I probably covered it slightly. I mean, I think Linda was saying she was trying to fit this into a biology lesson, weren't you? Is that what you said to begin with? I didn't quite hear. Or was it chemistry?
I think I might have said biology, but I meant chemistry.
You meant chemistry, right?
I meant chemistry.
I was going to say, suddenly trying to bring covalent bonding, because you've got a gap in knowledge in biology, is a fairly familiar one, because you're busy doing one subject and you suddenly find they haven't picked up the stuff from the other. So you have to jump sciences. Yes, you do. And you've got this lovely PowerPoint on the side that you're busy hooking images over into Bramble as you go along, and then suddenly you realize it's not going in anymore. So what I do is I do a lot of assessment, formative assessment during the lesson. I think this is really important when you haven't got a visual cue, and you've got to try and involve all three of them in the formative assessment. And then you've got to be prepared to say, "Oh, stuff the rest of the PowerPoint. We're going over to drawing." The one tip I would have, and this isn't just with Bramble, this is with any of the platforms, is don't have one device. Have your laptop like we have now, like that, but on the side, also log in your tablet, and don't log it in with sound. Log it in with no sound. And then use that as your drawing platform, so that you put the whiteboard up on that and you start drawing, and
yeah,
that makes a big difference. Now, we're taught that when we're doing Bramble, but a lot of people, have been set up on Team and Zooms, are sitting there trying to draw with the touchpad on the computer or with the mouse, and it's very difficult to do.
I'd say, actually, over the 18 months that I've been tutoring online, I have actually got quite good at drawing with the trackpad, but it's never better than using exactly one of those graphic tablets. Hazel, thank you for proudly showing us yours there. I think it's very important to know that most of, obviously, the NTP tuition this year was online, and that tutors who began thinking that they would be going into schools and working, in little kind of breakout rooms, but physical breakout rooms in schools, then realized that they were going to be, moving online, and that was part of some of the NTP tuition partners knew that they were going to be doing it online, all the way through, and some believed that they'd be going into schools and then were forced to move online. So there's certainly been a lot that NTP tutors have had to learn very quickly, and coupled with the fact that, as we've talked about, these are children who would never have normally received tuition, and whose parents would never have understood really, or would never have accessed tuition before. That's not something that's been in the family. There's not great understanding about it. And all of these factors mean that when these students and the schools and these tutors were thrown together to kind of come up with a solid learning plan on the spur of the moment, it was incredibly hard. And I don't think we can underestimate just how hard, at its foundations that was. So certainly, if we start kind of creeping into this territory of, this happened, that's simply because that really was the kind of the base nature of this. But I would like to look ahead to the future years of the NTP, because we know now that this is not just going to be a one-year program, and that this program will move into its second and its third and its fourth years, and eventually it will be likely to be phased out such that the schools who wish to keep those partnerships in place do so. But Hazel, looking to the future of the NTP, do you think that that the model should be altered, or do you think that the model works as it is? It just needs a couple of years of practice.
I think the model needs to be altered. I think that particularly there's been low attendance in lots of classes. I've heard this from lots of tutors, and I was in the group session earlier with Sharon Crawley, is it Crawley, and St John something. Some very important people, it seemed to me, talking about the timing of so much going on in secondary after school. Like I do 1.5 hours from 3:15 to 4:45, and that's a big ask of students if they're tired from school, and then they've got homework and they vote with their feet, unfortunately, and apparently this is quite a common phenomenon. But I think the basic model's okay, but I think the communication between schools, agencies and tutors could improve. But I know it's been manpower and getting the right people. But one of the good things that came out of this session earlier was this lady Sharon, very enthusiastic. She said, if you want a liaison person between tutor and school, don't go for the head teacher or the Senko or people that are over busy. Get a TA or a class teacher who's really got a vision for it and got the time and the motivation to chase the children up, to inspire them, to encourage them to go along to the sessions. And I thought that was a really good point. Someone who's got the time and enthusiasm to inspire the children. Yeah, this is a really important part of your education. I think all the different bits are a bit precarious and they've all got to work right at the same time for it to work. But it has got potential, but I think maybe the timings in the day need looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Jolyon?
I see it in two ways. I see an evolution, which is at the micro scale, where we need to improve the system. The way it's working. So compliance, attendance is a really big issue. Tutoring does not work if you never get in front of the students. That has to be dealt with. And there are two sides to that. One is getting the link to the school improved, and that's absolutely right. I totally think that is at the moment not good. The interface between the agencies and the schools is not sufficiently good. So I think there's the micro scale, and that's evolutionary, and the NTP can play a very important role in that. But I also happen to believe that there is something that is revolutionary, and that is bringing small group teaching into the children's lives. And I don't think it has to happen in school. I think it can happen earlier. I mean, German kids don't go to school at 9 o'clock or whatever. They go to school at 7. So we can do a little bit in the morning. And I'm getting work coming through asking for morning tutoring. And they can work later in the evening a little bit. They can go into sort of 7 o'clock. I mean, come off the Xbox. Mm-hmm. You don't need to go straight on the TV when you walk home. Go on, you're on a computer, right? Well, have half an hour or an hour's tuition. Maybe an hour's the wrong interval. Maybe we should be doing a few 45-minute sessions. And maybe when they're in year 11, we should be doing some hour and a half sessions. I don't know. But we need to bring that in. And then we need to be doing in the classrooms or in the school setting, the things that can only be done there. So, yeah, we can't do physical education online. No, we can't do it. We can't do practicals online very well. They have to be done in a laboratory. We can't do field trips, or maybe we should be putting tutors on field trips to help. I don't know, but we don't generally do field trips. So again, those things have to be done through the school. But, once the basic outline of the curriculum has been presented to the student, can the school not then interface with tutors and say, look, please, would you make sure these students have reached this point? By whatever road you need to take them through to get them there, but we want them at this point. And then as tutors, we can then have the flexibility to use our skill and our creativity to take those students, those 3 students, through from where they are and their understanding at that point to where the teacher wants them for the next session. And I think that's the way it has to be going forward. So it's much more like a university model of lecture and seminar and tutorial. And I think we need to have the hierarchy. But when you start doing that, you're starting to talk about having to redesign the physical structure of schools. You know, they don't need, you know, the classrooms have to be different. They have to be more like lecture theatres. And how you staff them becomes different. You probably need more TAs. I don't know. Quite how it's all going to work out, I don't know. I don't have the answers to everything. But I do think the education system we have, is already creaking. It's not broken yet, it's creaking. And I think we need to rethink it, especially as we go forward, having to educate children for a world that we don't even know what it's going to look like. So these children have got to be, as we were learning a couple of days ago from Ian's talk, you know, we've got to make them creative thinkers. They've got to be able to think their way out of problems. And we've got to help them do that. But I don't think, you know, talk and chalk and sausage machine education is the way anymore. I don't think it ever was, really, to be honest. Yeah.
Linda, how do you see the NTP, the attitude of the NTP kind of moving forward?
I think, like, to echo Hazel and Jolyon, there is a lot of teething issues with the NTP. Moving forward, there has to be some sort of plan in place for things like attendance. A lot like Hazel and probably Jolyon, I found myself on a lot of occasions, and I have to say most of my students do come, have a good session, and we can move on the next week. But I have also been sat in a classroom by myself, waiting for students to come, contacting the school liaison officer that is the contact in the school, but also my agency. And that isn't NTP, that's me sitting in a room. So I think it has to be fine-tuned. And I think what the NTP could possibly benefit from is listening to the tutors, maybe having, you know, quarterly or termly meetings with some of the NTP tutors to actually find out what's been going on, evaluating what has been, you know, put through so far. And it's sort of just getting feedback as they go along and trying to fix these issues as we go along as well. I definitely think small groups is going to be the way forward, because I have seen some of my children literally grow so much in confidence, having the first lesson where everyone's almost silent and I just feel like I'm talking the whole lesson, to the end of the session, they're asking questions, building up on each other's answers. And I'm not sure that is going to happen in a classroom of 30 plus students. So I definitely think small group teaching is something that should be here to stay, and the NTP scheme can help with. But like I said, there's a lot of ironing out to do, but parents, schools, and tutors should be involved in this process and evaluating as things go along.
Reflecting on progress and advantages and disadvantages as we go along. I think that's something that was never built into this year's model, was it? It was the ability to reflect and feedback as it was going along, because there was just too much prep work to go into the foundations of it. So what I'm hearing is a greater lead time, more communication, and I do hope that will improve as those relationships and as those structures between tutor, parent and school improve. Hazel, just please do.
Sorry, I think it's, in all the different jobs I've done, I think it's a uniquely lonely kind of situation, tutoring on the NTP, because you don't have any feedback from anybody really about anything, apart from The students might say, oh, that was good, and I understood it, and you can take from that feedback. But if students don't come, you don't know if you've been a bad tutor or there are other reasons, but I did have a note from Mum that someone was going to the dentist, which was fine. So I knew that's why they'd been a regular. So that was good. But when I've got one private student, and I know the mum and the student very well, and I liaise with the mum and I send information through to help her to prepare for a test, and I get feedback, oh, she really likes your teaching, etc. But with the NTP, and I've worked in a school situation, you're part of a team, you discuss, you support each other in your teaching and that kind of thing. But just not knowing why they don't come and not being able to find out and not knowing whether what you're doing is working to serve the school and the teacher, whether you really are filling in the gaps effectively and that kind of thing. I do think, in the moment, it's quite a lonely type of teaching. That's why I'm glad I've got qualified tutor to be part of. Come here and get some encouragement.
Yeah, it would be interesting to bring together, NTP tutors from a variety of partners and even bring in the academic mentors to the conversation. I feel like that's still probably a couple of years off, given that independent tutors are just beginning to get to kind of know each other. But certainly that's a look to the future, Hazel. Now we must draw this conversation to a close. So we must draw it to a close because of our listeners' attention spans, and we must draw it to a close because it is absolutely pitch black in Jolyon's room there. You can just see that the lights have gone out completely. That's a signal from Mother Nature that there we go.
Oh, there we are. A new lease of life to this
well,
podcast.
That was part one. We'll move on to part two now. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jolyon, for contributing your thoughts there. It's not every day that you get to hear from 3 NTP tutors all in one place, feeding off each other. So that was a privilege, certainly for me, and I hope for our listeners as well. So thank you both. Thank you, all of you. I think by both I meant both the speakers and both our listeners. So thank you, Richard. Thank you to the wonderful Jack, who kept the conversation so alive in the chat box as he always does. Thank you to Sadir, to Annette, to Charlotte, and to Elizabeth, who was here with us earlier. Cheerio then, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Ludo.
Thank you, Ludo.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference.